Today's special broadcast, I'm Gaurav Sawant. It's a day of fast-paced developments across the globe. Pakistan's Army Chief Field Marshal Asim Munir is back in the White House, and this time with Pakistan's Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif in tow. They've described the United States and especially President Trump as a man of peace. What's cooking between America and Pakistan? Remember, Donald Trump in his first tenure had described Pakistan as a country that was engaged in telling lies and deceit and had taken away $33 billion of American money. Now, India's External Affairs Minister, Dr. S. Jaishankar, he too has called out the double standards of the West, and he's also spoken of the limitations of organizations like the United Nations.
Terrorism enters Oval Office. Shehbaz hails man of peace Trump. But humiliation bellies the Bonhomie.
Maybe in this room right now, I don't know, because we're late. And I said maybe they'd like to join they actually may be somewhere in the beautiful Oval Office.
India calls out West's double standards.
Apart from jeopardizing supplies and logistics, access and cost themselves became pressure points on nations. Double standards are clearly in evidence.
Jaishankar says zero tolerance on terror.
As we confront conflict, economic pressures and terrorism, the limitations of multilateralism and the United Nations in particular are visible.
What is fueling Trump ties with Terrorism? That is our top focus on India First.
So Pakistan's Field Marshal Asim Munir was back in the White House, this time accompanied by Pakistan's Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif. Now, what's cooking between the United States of America and Pakistan? Is there a deal on counter-terrorism, as some analysts in Washington, D.C. put it? And Pakistan and counter-terrorism is like asking the wolves to guard sheep. Is that what's happening? Is it a cryptocurrency deal? Is America seeking bases in Pakistan for future operations, either against Afghanistan or even Iran in times to come? And what would that mean for Pakistan? It's a decision that Pakistan hasn't thought through, or has it? We'll debate all of that in greater detail. India's External Affairs Minister, Dr. S. Jaishankar, he's made it very clear. India's battling not just economic pressures, but also terrorism and conflict. And there are limitations to multilateralism. He's exposed even organizations like the United Nations and their limitations. I get you more in this report.
Top Pakistan leadership in the Oval Office. For the first time in 6 years, a Pakistani Prime Minister and Army Chief were hosted at the White House by an American president. After the meeting, in a statement, Shehbaz Sharif showered praise on Donald Trump, calling him a peacemaker. He hailed Trump's efforts to end global conflicts, credited him with facilitating ceasefire with India, lauded Trump's Gaza peace push, and expressed confidence that US-Pakistan partnership will only grow stronger. But it wasn't all roses. Reports suggest the two Pakistani leaders were made to wait for half an hour for the scheduled meet. Inside the Oval Office, President Trump casually remarked that the great Pakistani Prime Minister and the great Field Marshal may already be waiting in the building, as his Vice President Vance laughed.
They'd like to join
When the session finally happened, it was muted. No press, no joint statement, no White House photos. The only footage came from Pakistan itself. Contrast that with 2019. Imran Khan's Oval Office meeting was public, covered live, with Trump fielding questions alongside him.
I read a report today about
But the meet is the latest in Islamabad's pivot, a tilt back towards Washington after years in China's shadow. Trade deal has been sealed with lower tariffs and potential oil exploration deals. India is keeping a close watch. At the G20 Foreign Ministers meet in New York, External Affairs Minister Jaishankar tore into the double standards of the West.
Apart from jeopardizing supplies and logistics, access and cost themselves became pressure points on nations. Double standards are clearly in evidence.
Jaishankar went further, questioning the very credibility of multilateral forums, making it clear that India will not allow terror sanctuaries.
The need for reforming multilateralism has never been greater. Colleagues, the international situation is today both politically and economically volatile. We, as members of G20, have a particular responsibility to strengthen its stability and give it a more positive direction. That is best done by undertaking dialogue and diplomacy, by firmly combating terrorism, and by appreciating the need for stronger energy and economic security.
So while Shehbaz Sharif and Asim Munir walked out with photo ops, India exposed Pakistan on the global stage, talking tough on terror. Bureau Report, India Today.
How should India look at these images? What do they mean for India-US relations, and will this embolden Pakistan to try and target India once again? I have two voices, eminent voices, who track developments across the region very closely. Joining me on this broadcast with me is Professor Walter C. Ladwig, the third Associate Professor at the King's College in London. Also with me is Sushant Sareen, Senior Fellow at the Observer Research Foundation. And Sushant Sareen, your reading of Asim Munir being back at the White House, and this time with Shehbaz Sharif in tow. What's cooking between America and Pakistan?
Gaurav, we can only speculate on what. Something is cooking and the ground is shifting in this part of the world. But what exactly is there in the mind of Donald Trump, if at all there is anything in it, we don't know. So, as the Pakistanis been emboldened, certainly. But let me tell you what I think 5 or 6 things which could be happening. First is, of course, the most obvious one. You know, that the Pakistanis claim that rather than hiring lobbyists, they've been able to buy out the White House by, in a manner of bribing the Trump family and Trump associates, giving them some sweetheart deals on crypto, dangling the carrot of mining and critical minerals and stuff like that. The second is that it could be terrorism related, but Pakistan being a partner in fighting terrorism, you know, that's like crazy. That's my view. Okay. The third possibility is that there is a certain mercenary role that is expected from Pakistan in West Asia. I don't agree with this Bagram thing which you were talking about in your initial report, because I think on Bagram the agency is with the Taliban. I'm not so sure if the Taliban are going to hand over the use of that base to the Americans. So that's out. But on West Asia, the Pakistanis are smacking their lips in anticipation that tons of money will flow in, because now they will play the policeman in West Asia. They could get duties in Gaza. I don't know how the Israelis will allow Pakistanis, given the fact that the Pakistanis hate the Israelis even more than the Arabs do, and are constantly calling for, you know, the Jews. I don't see how that's going to be possible, but that is another part of it. And finally, I think there is this concept that America...
So let's take this one by one. There are 3 very pertinent points you've raised, Sushant. Let me take this one by one. Professor Ladwig, to have Pakistan cooperate on counter-terrorism is like having wolves guard the sheep, and that clearly cannot happen. Pakistan is the biggest exporter of radical Islamist terror. Is it cryptocurrency? Is it seeking air bases in Pakistan? Why is America suddenly being so sweet to Pakistan? First time Donald Trump said they've taken away $33 billion, they're liars, they indulge in deceit. And this time he's saying Asim Munir is a great man.
Well, let's not forget that Donald Trump in the first administration also did a complete whipsaw. If you remember the brief friendship and warming of relations that developed with Imran Khan that led Donald Trump to ultimately suggest, very falsely, that Prime Minister Modi had asked him to mediate between the two. So it's not the first time that he's done a complete 180 on U.S.-Pakistan policy, and the break from the Biden administration, where no one was thinking about Pakistan and it was not considered a strategic priority at all, is pretty remarkable. I think there is a concern in U.S. Central Command about ISIS-K, and the CENTCOM commander in testimony before Congress did mention Pakistani cooperation there. But it is really bizarre that the Trump administration, which seems to be so concerned about Islamic radicalism in the United States, is then cozying up to countries like Pakistan and Qatar.
Oh, it is very, very surprising. And Sushant Sareen, Israel is a very powerful country. Israel was able to take on multiple adversaries simultaneously. Now, Pakistan's dream of having missiles that can target Israel or go as far as Israel, will Israel wait for something, or is there trouble for Pakistan already if it even looks in that direction?
I don't think the Pakistanis will be that stupid. They can be remarkably stupid, but I don't see them being that stupid as to directly target Israel. And for what? I don't think the Israelis are ever going to target Saudi Arabia. That's not on the anvil, because the Saudis have really done nothing against Israeli security interests, right? So I don't see how the Pakistanis get any kind of segue into attacking Israel directly. But I think the Israelis will, of course, be looking at Pakistan very closely, and which is why I said that if at all there is any plan of bringing some kind of an international force of peacekeeping in Gaza, I don't see how the Israelis will like to see Pakistani groups out there. Second, the ISK factor. Listen, there is some credible information now that the Pakistanis are looking the other way as far as the ISK is concerned. There is a kind of uncomfortable kind of a coexistence between the Pakistanis and ISK, because ISK is seen as a very potent tool to be used against the Taliban, against the Baloch freedom fighters, and against the TTP inside Pakistan. And there will be some attacks of ISK on Pakistan, which gives them plausible deniability. But this is a game the Pakistanis have perfected in playing. And one more factor, Gaurav, I add, the Americans could also be using Pakistan as a tool to pressure India into giving in whatever the Americans want from India. So I think we should not ignore that, which would then play in the hands of the US skeptics in India. Not that they need to do much anymore, because I think there is deep skepticism in India now on any kind of a long-term strategic relationship with Pakistan. And I personally think that the Indian government is shooting itself in the foot by saying that it's all very well, the trade negotiations can go on and all the other stuff which the Americans are doing to India can go on, but the strategic and the security relationship remains intact. I don't see how, number one, how it can remain intact, and I don't see why it should remain intact, because that is one of the leverages in the Pakistan, on the Americans, who might be using Pakistan on West Asia and India for East Asia. Not that I expect India to become America's cat's paw as far as East Asia is concerned.
Okay. Professor Ladwig, would you agree with that assessment that Donald Trump may be trying to tell India, unless you sign a deal on my terms, well, there is Pakistan, and that's not good news for India?
If Donald Trump had been surrounded with South Asia specialists like he had been in his first administration, I would say that that idea was not remotely plausible. Given the complete lack of expertise that exists in the National Security Council and the fact that he surrounded himself with political loyalists who just simply say yes to the man, I wouldn't take it off the table. He may think that in his art of the deal world, he's going to somehow convince India that they need to do what he says by doing this. It's a completely ludicrous proposition. I think no real expert would suggest it has a hope of succeeding, but with this White House, I don't think we can write it off.
Okay. Okay, but Sushant Sareen, as Professor Ladwig says, it just sounds so ludicrous that anybody would think that they can use the Pakistan card against India, and the steps that Donald Trump is taking, whether it's on the H-1B visas or 100% pharma tax unless it's manufactured in America, or the Chabahar exemption that's been revoked, all of that would be levers of pressure that will make India accept Donald Trump's terms. On the contrary, will that not end up hardening India's stance, given America is proving to be so unreliable? And in that light, what are India's options?
I think, Gaurav, from the Indian point of view, they are still trying to see whether they can tread this very treacherous ground, which has been prepared by the American administration now on how to tread this ground. So I think the dilemmas are going to be there for India. And the problem for India is going to be that if you give in to what the Trump administration is asking you, you are left with no feet to stand on. And if you don't, then there is a heavy price to be paid. So it's not an easy choice for any government in India to make at this point in time. And then, of course, the fact of the matter remains that it's not just whether the Americans are going to be pushing us against the wall and expecting us to succumb to whatever the pressure tactics they're doing. I think the rethink in India is completely there now. I don't see how any Indian government going forward, and it's not just about the Donald Trump administration, but as Walter was saying, that Trump in his first term first abused the Pakistanis and then became a fanboy of Imran Khan. Not that it led to anything substantial for the Americans. He could do something similar with India. But the fact is, will any responsible Indian administration ever trust the Americans again? We still had not gotten rid of the 1971 baggage. And now you have this happening. And there is no guarantee that going forward, you won't have another crazy or ludicrous kind of an administration like this one under J.D. Vance or Marco Rubio. Incidentally, Walter might like to consider that Trump might have had South Asia specialists last time, but he's had people in his administration this time who are very well disposed towards India. And yet, look at the kind of policies they've been following against India. So either it's just Trump and his some of the cronies surrounding him who are making all the policies, and he doesn't listen to a Tulsi Gabbard or a Marco Rubio or any of the other slightly more mature voices in his administration, or they're all on the same page. And going forward, how do you know similar people might not be in power tomorrow? So I think India really needs to start rethinking its strategic environment once again. And that whole dependence factor or that factor that, a close relationship with the Americans is the way forward. I don't see how any Indian can say that with any degree of confidence anymore.
So, you talk about what happened in 1971, just see what happened in 1998 after India's Pokhran nuclear tests. And Professor Ladwig, Sushant Sareen and I, we've actually discussed this in the past, that there's an entire generation that grew up being told Americans cannot be trusted. It's 25 years plus of effort that went in that Indians had started trusting America again until Donald Trump behaved in this manner. So not only does that lack of trust come back into this relationship, including strategic relationship, this will also end up emboldening Pakistan, won't it, to carry out strikes, terror strikes against India, now that Pakistan would think it has three daddies, China, America and Saudi Arabia.
Well, look, the damage that Donald Trump is doing to the U.S.-India relationship is really catastrophic. And as both of you have said, this is just giving proof to all of the skeptics and all of those who have thought that the Americans could never be trusted. And it's really disheartening to see this play out. Whether or not Pakistan will be further emboldened by this, I still believe that the limits of the relationship between the U.S. and Pakistan are real. American interests in Pakistan are twofold. their nuclear weapons program, and their links to terrorist groups. There is not an upside with respect to the U.S.-Pakistan relationship. They are not a dynamic, growing economy. They are not a major regional player. They're a containment exercise at best. Nobody wants to see that country spill over or melt down. I don't even think India wants to see that happen. So they have carried out strikes against India in the past with their own, of their own initiative. I think the China support is a much more significant factor, and I don't think the Americans would stand by and allow that to happen.
So, Shansarin, is there an apprehension Pakistan could be emboldened with three daddies now, China, Saudi Arabia, and the United States?
Gaurav, if you look at the kind of discourse in Pakistan, the deal with Saudi Arabia, for example, again, we don't know what exactly are the details of that deal. But the deal with Saudi Arabia was really, in a sense, Pakistan bringing the muscle and the Saudis bringing the money. But, the discourse inside Pakistan is that next time around, India will have to think 10 times because Saudi Arabia and Pakistan now have this defense deal, which means that the Pakistanis are seeking protection from Saudi Arabia rather than giving protection to Saudi Arabia. The whole logic is turned on its head because they think that with the Saudi-Pakistani defense deal, India's strategic calculations get far more complicated than what they already were. There was already the China factor that we had to consider and factor in. And along with it, now there is the Saudi factor. And with the Saudi factor could come a couple of other countries which are very closely aligned to the Saudi Arabians. So that is the Pakistani thinking. Now, whether that is the way it plays out or not is another matter altogether. But I find it rather ironic that here it was Pakistan supposed to take its muscle to protect Saudi Arabia, but the Pakistanis are depending upon Saudi money and Saudi business with India and Saudi money to Pakistan to protect it. So, it's a kind of a strange kind of a situation, which exactly would embolden the Pakistanis to try something funny. Not that they've already stopped. They're trying to do it in various ways. So I suppose we are going to be on the tenterhooks for the foreseeable future.
Or will have to remain extremely aggressive to counter every threat and perhaps, if possible, preemptively carrying out strikes to target the enemy and destroy terror at source. Professor Ladwig and Sushant Sareen for joining me here on this part of that India First discussion. Many thanks. After more than 60 years of service to the Indian Air Force and the nation, the iconic MiG-21 has finally retired. The last of the MiG-21s flew for the last time. They came in the 1960s. They've been a part of every operation in defense of the motherland. The MiG-21. When the surrender at Dhaka was being contemplated, the bombing of the governor's house in Dhaka that ultimately led to the surrender, the MiG-21 was involved. In the Kargil War of 1999, in history, for the first time, Wing Commander Abhinandan, after the Balakot airstrikes, a MiG-21 shot down a Pakistani American F-16 fighter jet. This aircraft was involved in every operation. Of course, it was an unforgiving aircraft. There were several air crashes because India lacked advanced jet trainer initially. So from the intermediate jet trainer, pilots would graduate straight to the supersonic MiG-21, landing speeds and takeoff speeds upwards of 300 kilometers per hour, and it led to some crashes and accidents, human error and technical error. But overall, all pilots who've flown it, they said this was perhaps the best machine of its times. Ultimately to be replaced by the light combat aircraft, we bring you this report on the last flight of the MiG-21.
It was more than just a fighter jet. It has many memories and legends attached. And on a bittersweet Friday morning in Chandigarh, it flew for the last time. India bid farewell to its most enduring warrior of the skies, the MiG-21, a jet that didn't just fly missions but flew history. From dogfights in 1971 to guarding Kargil's icy heights, this was the machine that stood tall when the nation called. For 62 unbroken years, it carried the weight of India's defense. Defense Minister Rajnath Singh called it a living legend, a symbol of valor, courage and unmatched service.
इतने लंबे समय तक MiG-21 अनेक वीरतापूर्ण कृत्यों का साक्षी रहा है। इसका योगदान किसी एक घटना तक या केवल एक युद्ध तक सीमित नहीं रहा है।
A jet that trained hundreds of fearless pilots and brought many back home.
बहुत अच्छे से याद करूँगा, बहुत एयरक्राफ्ट फ्लाई करते करते आपका जीवन भी उसी के साथ बीत रहा है, आप भी सीखते हैं, आप भी आगे बढ़ते हैं। तो मुझे लगता है कि इट इज़ वेरी enlightening for anybody, and for me, I would say it is a personal journey, of my growth along with the aircraft. So I'm feeling great to be here.
Air Chief Marshal AP Singh himself took to the skies, flying with squadron leader Priya Sharma, paying homage.
Factually, I had never thought in my living life that I'll see this day when MiG-21 will not be part of the Indian Air Force or part of our life. You see, when I say every MiG pilot's life, because whether you are there or not, you can anytime go and visit the squadron. You can touch the aircraft, you can sit in the cockpit. You can't fly, of course, but everything else. So you always felt it was always there. But after today, we can't do that.
And then the engine slowed. The silence fell, and MiG-21 stood still under a water cannon salute. It wasn't just a farewell to a fighter jet. It was goodbye to an era.
Starting from the 1965 war to the 1971 bombing of the Governor House in Dhaka to 1999 and 2019 post-Balakot strike when F-16 of Pakistan was shot down, and most recent one, the 2025 Operation Sindoor. Every time MiG-21 flew, it flew victorious and kept the nation's head high. This is Shivani Sharma with camera person Prem Chand for India Today from Chandigarh.